Chapter 8, 8 months earlier, Saturday, December 18th, 1976. In the computer center of the sealed wing of the Greenwich House, 7 days before Christmas, the monitor boards and system bulbs and cathode ray tubes and glowing scopes, although they were mostly red and green, had not reminded Salisbury of the holiday. When he entered the room, his first time there in months, Klinger looked around at the lights and said, "Very Christmassy." Strange enough, it was rather Christmassy. However, because he hadn't perceived something which had registered with the general in mere seconds, Salisbury felt uneasy. For almost 2 years now, 8 days and nights, he had been telling himself that he must be quicker, sharper, more cunning, and more forward-thinking than either of his partners, if he was to keep his partners from eventually putting a bullet in his head and burying him at the southern end of the estate beside Brian Kingman, which was surely what they had in mind for him and for each other, either that or slavery through the key lock program. Therefore, it was quite disturbing that to him that Klinger, hairy, flat-faced gorilla that he was, should make, of all things, an aesthetic observation before Salisbury himself had made it. The only way he could deal with his own uneasiness was to put the general off his stride as quickly as possible. "You can't smoke in here. Put that out at once." Rolling the chariot from the centre of his thick lips to one side, Klinger said, "Oh, surely." "The delicate machinery," Salisbury said sharply, gesturing at the Christmassy lights. Klinger took the slender cigar from his mouth and appeared to be about to drop it on the floor. "The waste can." When he had disposed of the chariot, the general said, "Sorry." Salisbury said, "That's all right. You're not familiar with a place like this, with computers and all that. You couldn't be expected to know." And he thought, "Score one for me." Where's Leonard?" Klinger asked. "He won't be here." "For such an important test?" "He wishes it weren't necessary." "Pontius Pilate? What?" Looking at the ceiling as if he could see through it, Klinger said, "Up there, washing his hands." Salisbury wasn't about to take part in any conversation meant to dissect or analyze Dawson. He had taken every measure to protect himself from any attempt on Dawson's part to plant bugs in his work area. He didn't believe it was possible for anyone to spy on him while he was in here, but he couldn't be positively, absolutely certain of that. Under the circumstances, he felt that paranoia was a rational vantage point from which to view the world. "What all have you got to show me?" Klinger asked. "For a start, I thought you wanted to see a few printouts from the key locks program." "I'm curious," the general admitted, picking up a sheet of computer paper that was folded like an accordion into a dozen of 18-inch long sections. Salisbury said, "All three of our new employees, the mercenaries." "Yes, all three of them were given the drug and then shown a series of film, ostensibly as evening entertainment, The Exorcist, Jaws, and Black Sunday, on successive nights. These were, of course, very special copies of the film, processed right here on the estate. I did the work personally. I printed each of them over a different stage of the subliminal program." "Why those three movies in particular?" "I could have used any I wanted," Salisbury said. "I just chose them at random from Leonard's film library. The movie is simply the package, not the content. It merely establishes a reason for the subject to stare at the screen for a couple of hours while the subliminal program is running below their recognition threshold." He handed the printout to Klinger. "This is a second-by-second verbal translation of the images appearing on the screen in the rheostatic film, which begins simultaneously with the movie. Whenever the computer prints the legend, it means that the visual subliminals have been interrupted by a block letter message on the rheostatic film, a direct command to the viewer. The first 60 seconds do nothing but ensure that the subjects will pay close attention to the rest of the movie," Salisbury said, "beginning with the second minute and continuing throughout the movie. He is very carefully, very gradually primed for stage 2 of the program and for eventual total submission to the key lock behavior mode. Carefully and slowly." "Because of what happened to Brian Kingman?" the general asked. "Because of what happened to Brian Kingman," Klinger said. "The penis doesn't become erect until the viewer is told that obedience to the key equals satisfaction." "That's right. And you'll notice that both the man and woman's orgasms are represented. This program would be effective with either sex." "Was all this taken from one porno film?" "It was shot specifically for me by a professional pornographic filmmaker in New York City," Salisbury said, pushing his glasses up on his nose and wiping his damp forehead. "He was instructed to use only the most attractive performers. He shot everything at regular light intensity, but I used a special process to print below the recognition threshold. Then I intercut the sex footage with the block letter messages. He unfolded some of the printout. The first sequence lasts another 40 seconds. Then there is 2-second pause and another message censored in the same fashion. I see the pattern, Klinger said. How many of these legends were there? They were standing at one end of the computer console. Salisbury leaned over and used a keyboard. One of the screens mounted on the wall began a line print. Salisbury touched a tab on the console. The screen went blank. The series was repeated 3 times through the film. The same thing the second night? Klinger asked. No, he picked up another folded printout from the seat of the console chair and exchanged it for a stage analysis. The first minute is spent securing the subject's undivided attention as it was in the first film. The difference between stage 1 and stage 2 becomes evident starting with the second minute. The second stage of the program alternates between negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement, Salisbury said. The next 25 seconds are devoted to a sex reinforcement sequence, much like you saw at the first printout. Skip ahead just a bit. Looking up from the printout, Klinger said, do you mean that death is effective as sex in subliminal persuasion? Nearly so, yes. In advertising, subliminals can be used to establish the same sort of motivational equation with death as with sex. According to Wilson Bryan Key, who wrote a book about the nature of subceptive manipulation a few years back, the first use of death images might have come in Calvert Whiskey ad that appeared in a number of magazines in 1971. Since then, hundreds of death symbols have become standard tools of the major ad agencies. Putting down the second printout, the journal said, what about the third stage? What was hidden in the film you showed them on the third night? Salisbury had another length of computer paper in the beginning. This one just reinforces and strengthens messages and effects of the first 2 films. It's broken down into tenths of seconds in some places because by the time the subjects were primed for faster import rapid-fire commands like the others, it really begins within the second minute. Further on, both the tempo and the emotional impacts of the images increase drastically. Much further on, faster and faster. Eventually there was less time given in the motives, images, and more to the direct commands. That pace is maintained straight through to the end of the film, Salisbury said. During the last 15 minutes, while all of this sex and death input continues, the concept of the key lock code phrase is also introduced and implanted permanently in the viewer's deep subconscious mind. That's all there is to it. Thanks to the drug that primes them for the subliminal, yes, that's all there is to it. And they don't realize they've seen any of it. If they did know, the program would have no effect on them. It has to speak solely to the subconscious in order to pass the natural reasoning ability of the conscious mind. Klinger pulled the command chair away from the console and sat down. His left hand was curled in his lap. It was so matted with black hair that it reminded Salisbury of a sewer rat. The journal petted it with his other hand while he considered the printouts he had just seen. At last he said, our 3 mercenaries. When did they complete the third stage of the program? 30 days ago. I've been observing them and testing their submissiveness for the past few weeks. Any of them react at all as Kingman did? They all had bad dreams, Salisbury said, probably about what they had seen on the rheostatic screen. None of them could recall. Furthermore, they all had severe night chills and mild nausea, but they lived. Encounter any other problems? None. No weak spot in the program. No moments when they refused to obey you. None at all. So far, in a few minutes after we put them to the ultimate test, we'll know whether or not to have absolute control of them. If not, I'll start over. If we do, champagne. Klinger sighed. I suppose this is something we have to know. I suppose this last test is entirely necessary. Entirely. I don't like it. Weren't you an officer in Vietnam? What's that got to do with this? You've sent men to die before, grimacing, Klinger said. But always with honour, and there's sure as hell no honour in what's going to happen here. Honour, Salisbury thought acidly. You're as big an idiot as Leonard. There isn't any haven, and there's no such thing as honour. All that counts is getting what you want. You know that, and I know that, and even Leonard, when he's humbled over his fruit cup at a White House prayer breakfast with Billy Graham and the President, knows that, but I'm the only one of us who will admit to himself, getting to his faculty and say, okay, let's finish this. Where are they? In the next room, waiting. They know what they're going to do. No. Salisbury went to his desk, thumbed a button on his intercom and spoke into the wire grid. Rosner, Holbrook and Pickard, come in now, we're ready for you. A few seconds later, the door opened and 3 men filed inside. Go to the centre of the room, Salisbury said. They did as he directed. You've already opened them with the code phrase? Klinger asked. Before you came. The first of them, in spite of the fact that he was in his late 30s or early 40s, looked like a dangerous street corner punk. Slim but hard and wiry, 5 feet 10, dark complexion, dark brown hair comb, straight back and greying at the temples. A way of standing with his feet apart and most of his weight on his toes, so that he was always prepared to move and move quickly. His face was pinched, his eyes a bit too close together, his lips thin and greyish pink above a pointed chin. This is Rosner, Salisbury told Klinger. Glenn Rosner, American. He's been a freelance soldier for 16 years. Hello, Rosner said. None of you is to speak unless spoken to, Salisbury said. Is that understood? 3 voices. Yes. The second man was approximately the same age as the first. Otherwise, he could not have been less like Rosner. 6 feet 2, husky, fair complexion, reddish blonde hair, cropped close to his head, a broad face, heavy jowls. His stern expression had been held for so many years that it seemed graven in his flesh. He looked like the sort of father who made arbitrary rules, used corporal punishment with a child at least twice a week, talked tough, act bull-headed, and turned sons like Glenn Rosner into street corner punks. Salisbury, this is Peter Holbrook. He's British. He's been a mercenary for 20 years, ever since he was 22. The last man was no older than 30, and he was the only one of the 3 who could be called handsome. 6 feet, lean and muscular, thick brown hair, a broad brow, peculiar green-grey eyes, and long lashes that any woman would have been proud to have for her own. Very rectangular features and an especially strong jawline and chin. He somewhat resembled the young Rex Harrison. Michael Pickard, Salisbury said, French, speaks fluent English. He's been a mercenary for 4 years. Which will it be? Klinger asked. Pickard, I think. Let's get on with it, then. Salisbury turned to Rosner and said, Glenn, there's a folder canvas drop cloth on my desk. Bring it here. Rosner went to the desk, came back with the cloth. Peter, you can help him unfold it on the floor. A minute later, the 9-foot square canvas sheet was spread out in the middle of the room. Michael, stand in the middle of the cloth. The Frenchman obeyed. Michael, what am I? You are the key. And what are you? I'm the lock. You will do what I tell you to do. Yes, of course, Pickard said. Relax, Michael. You are very relaxed. Yes, I feel fine. You are very happy. Pickard smiled. You will remain happy regardless of what happens to you in the next few minutes. Is that understood? Yes. You will not attempt to stop Peter and Glenn from carrying out the orders I give them, regardless of what those orders are. Is that understood? Yes. Taking a 3-foot length of heavy nylon cord from a pocket of his white laboratory smock, Salisbury said, Peter, take this. Slip it about Michael's neck. See if your neck as if you're going to strangle him, but proceed no further than that. Holbrook stepped behind the Frenchman and looped the cord around his throat. Michael, are you relaxed? Oh, yes, quite relaxed. Your hands are at your sides now. You will keep them at your sides until I tell you to move them. Still smiling, Pickard said, all right. You will smile as long as you are able to smile, yes. And even when you are no longer able to smile, you'll know this is for the best. Pickard smiled. Glenn, you will observe you will not become involved in the little drama that these 2 are about to act out. I won't become involved, Rosner said. Peter, will you do what I tell you? The big man nodded, without hesitation. Strangle Michael. If the Frenchman's mouth slipped, it was only by the slightest fraction. Then Holbrook jerked on both ends of the cord. Pickard's mouth flew open. He seemed to be trying to scream, but he had no voice. He began to gag. Although Holbrook was wearing a long-sleeved shirt, Salisbury could see the muscles bunching and straining in his thick arms. Each desperate breath that Pickard drew produced a thin, rattling wheeze. His eyes bulged. His face was flushed. Pull tighter, Salisbury told Holbrook. The Englishman obliged. A fierce grin, not of humour, but of effort, seemed to transform his face into a death head. Pickard fell against Holbrook. Holbrook stepped back. Pickard went to his knees. His hands were at his sides. He was making no effort to save himself. Jesus, jump to hell, Klinger said, amazed, numbed, unable to speak above a whisper, shuddering, convulsing. Picard lost control of his bladder and bowels. Salisbury was pleased that he had thought to provide the canvas drop cloth. Seconds later, Holbrook stepped away from Picard. His task completed, the garrote had made deep, angry red impressions in the palm of his hand. Salisbury took another length of cord from another pocket in his smock and gave it to Rosner. Do you know what this is, Glenn? Yes. He had watched impassively as Holbrook murdered the Frenchman. Glenn, I want you to give the cord to Peter. Without even pausing to think about it, Rosner placed the second garrote in the Englishman's hand. Now turn your back to Peter. Rosner turned. Are you relaxed, Glenn? No. Relax, be calm, don't worry about anything at all. That's an order. The lines in Rosner's face softened. How do you feel, Glenn? Relax. Good. You won't try to keep Peter from obeying the orders I give him, and regardless of what those orders are. I won't interfere, Rosner said. Salisbury turned to the Englishman. Loop the cord around Glenn's neck as you did with Mikkel. With an expert flip and twist of the garrote, Holbrook was in position. He waited for orders. Glenn, Salisbury said, are you tense? No, I'm relaxed. That's fine, just fine. You will continue to be relaxed. Now I'm going to tell Peter to kill you, and you're going to permit him to do that. Is that clear? Yes, I understand. His placid expression didn't waver. Did you want to live? Yes, I want to live. Then why are you willing to die? I. He looked confused. You're willing to die because refusal to obey the key means pain and death anyway. Isn't that right, Glenn? That's right. Salisbury watched the two men closely for signs of panic. There was none, not even any of stress. The stench from Michael Picard's foul body was nearly overpowered and getting worse. Rosner surely knew what was about to happen to him. He had seen Mikkel die, had been told he would die in the same way, yet he stood unmoving, apparently unafraid. He was willing to commit what amounted to suicide rather than disobeying the key. In fact, disobedience was literally inconceivable to him. Total control, the general said. Yet they don't look or behave like zombies. Because they aren't, there's nothing supernatural involved. Just the ultimate in behavior modification technique. Salisbury was elated. Peter gave me the order. Thank you. You have both done well, exceptionally well. Now I want you to wrap Mikkel's body in the canvas and move it to the next room. Wait there until I have additional orders for you. As if they were a pair of ordinary labourers talking about how to move a load of bricks from here to there, Rosner and Holbrook quickly discussed the job at hand. When they had decided on the best way to roll and carry the corpse, they set to work. Congratulations, Kling said. He was perspiring. Cool, dry, steady-eyed, earnest Kling was sweating like a pig. What do you think of the computer lights now? Salisbury wondered. Do they look as Christmassy as they did 10 minutes ago? The computer room smelled of lemons. Salisbury had used an aerosol spray to get rid of the odour of feces and urine. He took a bottle of whiskey from his desk drawer and poured himself a shot to celebrate. Klinger had a double shot to steady his nerves. When he had tossed it back, he said, And now what? The field test. You mentioned that before, but why? Why can't we go ahead with the Middle East plan as Leonard outlined it in Tahoe nearly 2 years ago? We know the drug works, don't we? And we know the subliminals work. I achieved the desired result with Holbrook, Rosner, and Paul Picard. Salisbury said, sipping his whiskey. But it doesn't necessarily follow that everyone will react as they have. I can't possibly have complete confidence in the program until I've treated and observed and tested a few hundred subjects of both sexes and of all ages. Furthermore, our 3 mercenaries were treated and responded in controlled lab situations before we can take the extraordinary risk involved with something like the Middle East plan, where we've got to create a new subliminal series for another culture and in another language. We've simply got to know what the results will be in the field. Klinger poured himself another shot of whiskey as he lifted the glass to his lips. A look of fear flitted across his face. It lasted no more than a second or two, pretending to be thinking about the field test. He stared at the liquor in his glass and then at the bottle on the desk and then at Salisbury's glass. Laughing, Sarah said, Don't worry, Ernest. I wouldn't slip the drug into my own Jack Daniels. Besides, you're not a potential subject. You're my partner. Klinger nodded. Nevertheless, he put his glass down without tasting the whiskey. Where would you run a field test like this? Black River, Maine. It's a small town near the Canadian border. Why there? Salisbury went to the nearest program console and typed out an order to the computer. As he typed, he said, 2 months ago, I drew a list of the basic requirements for the ideal test site. All of the screens began to present the same information. Lumber Camp, Klinger said. It's a company town for Big Union supply. Nearly everyone in Black River works for Big Union or service the people who do. The company maintains a full-scale camp, barracks, mess hall, recreation facilities, the whole works, near their planned forests for unmarried loggers who don't want to go to the expense of renting a room or an apartment in the village. There's an interesting bit of additional data that goes with that one. Salisbury said the American station is owned by a subsidiary of Future Rex. It plays a lot of old movies at night and on weekends. We'll be able to get copies of the station program schedules well in advance. We can prepare subliminary augmented prints of the movies they're going to show and switch those out for the original prints in the station's film library. There's a bit of luck, saves us some time, otherwise Futurix would have to acquire one of the stations and that could take years. But how can you be certain the people in Black River will watch these movies you've doctored? They're going to be inundated with subliminals in a variety of media that will command them to watch. For instance, the Dawson Foundation for Christian Ethics will run dozens of public service commercials in both the Canadian and American stations 2 days in advance of the movies. Each of these commercials will have a very strong subliminal commands directing the people in town and in the lumber camp to tune in at the right time on the right channel. We'll also do a direct mail advertising for several of Leonard's companies as a means of getting even more subceptive messages to them. Everyone in town will receive ads in the mail and some free gifts like soap samples, shampoo samples, and free rolls of photographic film. The advertisements and the samples will be packaged in wrappers rich in subliminal commands to watch a certain television station at a certain hour on a certain day. Even if the subject throws a piece of mail away without opening it, he'll be affected because of the envelopes will be printed over with subliminal messages. The major magazines and newspapers entering Black River during the period of programming will carry ads full of subceptive commands that direct the people to watch the movies. He was getting a bit breathless in his recital. A motion picture theatre could not ordinarily prosper in a town that size of Black River, but Big Union runs on as a service to the town. During the summer, every day but Sunday, there's a matinee show for children. The prints of the film shown at these matinees will be our prints, with subliminals urging the children to watch television movies that will contain the Keylock program. All radio stations reaching the area will carry special 30-second spot ads, hundreds of them, one sub-audio subliminal directives. Those account for only half our methods. By the time all these washes through the community, everyone will be in front of the television set at the right time. What about the people who don't have television sets? Klinger asked. There's not much to do in a place as isolated as Black River, Salisbury said. The recreation hall in the camp has 10 sets. Virtually everyone in town owns a set. Those who don't will be directed by the first wave of preliminary subliminal to watch the movie at a friend's house or with a relative or neighbour. For the first time, Klinger looked at Salisbury with respect. Incredible. Thank you. What about the drug? How will that be introduced? Salisbury finished his whiskey. He felt wonderful. There are only 2 sources of food and beverages within the site. The lumber camp men get what they want from the mess hall in town. Everyone buys from Edison's general store. Edison has no competition. He even supplies the town's only diner. Now both the mess hall and the general store receives their goods from the same foods wholesaler in Augusta. Ah, the general said. He smiled. It's a perfect commando operation for Holbrook and Rosner. They can break into the wholesaler's warehouse at night and quickly contaminate several different items set aside for shipment to Black River. He pointed to the cathode ray tubes where the list of requirements for an ideal site was being reprinted. Number 4. Klinger looked at the screen to his left. Ordinarily, in a backwoods village like this, Salisbury said, each house would have its own freshwater well, but the mills need a reservoir for industrial purposes, so the town benefits. How did you choose Black River? Where did you learn all this stuff? Salisbury just pressed a tab on the programming keyboard and cleared the screen. In 1960, Leonard bankrolled a company named Statistical Profiles Incorporated. It does all the marketing research for his other companies and for companies he doesn't own. It pays for a truck line to the Census Bureau databanks. We use statistical profiles to run a search for the ideal test site. Of course, they didn't know why we were interested in a town that met these particular requirements. Frowning, the general said, how many people with statistical profiles were involved in the search? 2, Salisbury said. I know what you're thinking. Don't worry. They're both scheduled to die in accidents well before we begin the field test. I suppose we'll send Rosner and Holbrook to contaminate the reservoir. Then we get rid of them. The general raised his bushy eyebrows. Kill them? Or order them to commit suicide? Why not just tell them to forget everything they've done, to wipe it from their minds? That might save them from prosecution if things went badly wrong, but it wouldn't save us. We can't wipe from our minds all memory of what we had them do. If problems develop with the field tests, serious problems that throw our entire operation in the garbage, and if it turns out that Ross and Holbert were seen at the reservoir or left any clues behind, well, we don't want the authorities to connect us with Glenn and Peter. What problems could arise that would be that serious? Anything, nothing, I don't know. After he had thought of this for a while, Klinger said, yes, I suppose you're right, I know I am. Have you set a date for the field test? We would be ready by August, Salisbury said. Thanks for listening.